Hello and welcome to today's video. In today's video, I'm going to make a fairy door inside one of the little shadow boxes that I bought at Hobby Lobby. So if you watched my shopping video, and if you haven't, definitely check that out. But I bought a bunch of these little shadow boxes that I wanted to try to do some different things in them. And one of the things I wanted to do is make a fairy door. Actually, I have a couple different ideas. So this is the first attempt at a fairy door inside a shadow box. To start things off, I went ahead and took apart the shadow box. I wanted to get an idea of how big of an area I could work in. Luckily, the insert in the shadow box comes out, so I was able to trace that on a piece of printer paper. So I did it from the inside, and then I just covered that with wax paper to give myself a clean working area. And then I'm going to go ahead and roll out my base color so it fits in that box on the left there. Now, I know this isn't going to be perfect, and I knew from the start I would have to trim it down some, but I figured if I could get it pretty close, that would be less work at the end as far as trimming it down and getting it to fit in the shadow box. So I just mixed gray granite with some black clay to give me a dark stone look. I was going to do stones around the door, and so I thought if I had some dark stones behind, that way any gaps, all you would see is more stonework behind it. So I kind of just used kind of a cookie cutter technique to mark where this was, and then just trimmed off the excess clay with an X-Acto knife. Now once I had the base shape cut out, I wanted to go ahead and cut out a shape for my door. So I just freehanded that with the X-Acto knife and then cut that out, and then just kind of made sure it still fit in my rectangle for the shadow box. Alright, now that that's done, I can start working on the door itself. So I took a couple different shades of brown, and then I took some of the lighter brown and mixed it with white to give me even a lighter brown. And then I'll swirl all those together so my clay kind of has a wood grain texture to it. Or should say like a wood grain look to it, not a texture. It'll still be smooth. I'll add the texture after that. So once I roll this out, I'm using my shape again to kind of, give me the general idea that I want to do. And then I cut out individual boards for the door. Now you'll see here, I've done this before, but I flip them. And that way the grain that's in that marbled clay won't match up. So it looks like they're, different, cut from different boards, if that makes sense. Now I just fit it into my stone backdrop. Kind of trim off the excess to get this to fit. And then I add some texture to it. So we're doing texture this time. So I just take the needle tool and drag it across. I did some deeper indentions at the top and the bottom to make it look like the wood that's splitting. And then once I have that done, I kind of squeeze in the gray granite clay a little bit more to kind of tighten it up against that door. So then the next thing I'm going to do is do all the hardware for the door. So I'm using gold clay, and I wanted to cut out basically the plate for the door handle and I did some little bolts and keyhole. And then after that, I'll go ahead and shape out kind of a small ball to be the door handle. Then I'm going to work on the hinges for the door. I've done a fairy door before on my channel, so I wanted to do something a little bit different, add a little more style to these. I started off with these curved hooks. The top one I didn't like because it stuck out too far, and I thought it'd be too close to the door knocker. So I kind of did that one a standard one and did a different style for the bottom one. And as with the plate for the door handle, I went ahead and did some indentions and made some little bolts in there. Then for this one, I decided to go ahead and do a door knocker. Originally, I was thinking of something like those faces from Labyrinth. But then I had an idea to do kind of a hand hanging down, holding on to the ring for the door knocker. So I did the ring first and kind of evened that out so it was as close to a circle as it could be. And then I cut out the shape for the main part of the hand and then sculpted each of the fingers. So I was trying to debate whether I wanted to just do the middle one or all of them, and I thought the middle one looked weird, so I brought the other two in and sculpted those down so they were like grabbing the knocker. And then I thought it looked kind of odd without a thumb, so I sculpted a thumb and had that off to the side. The last thing I need to do on the door itself is to do the stones going around the outside of the door. So I just used gray granite clay on this. So I really like the look of the gray granite clay, and this way I didn't have to mix anything. Sometimes it's nice to make it a little simpler. I did have some dark left over that I had mixed with the black, so you saw where I did place one down, but I didn't like the way it looked. It was too much of a contrast with the other stones, so I took that out. And then later you'll see I filled in some of the gaps with some smaller pebbles of the dark gray granite, and I think that's a better look. And if you decide to do a fairy door, there is no right or wrong on how to do these. I just like to kind of make a bunch of different size stones, so it has just a unique look to it. And then I went ahead and went over a lot of the stones with a ball tool to kind of give them a different texture to them, so they weren't just all rounded. Stones kind of have different edges, and I think that gave me the look I was going for. So you'll see here, after I get everything trimmed down, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of the darker gray granite for those pebbles like I mentioned, and put those into some of the gaps. And like I said, I wasn't worried about filling in all the gaps because I did do that stone background to it. Now that the door is done, I'm going to go ahead and make some grass and some vines to go with the door. So I started off, and you can see that rectangle to the right, that's going to be my base size. And so I started off and put some green polymer clay there, and then took this kind of rake type tool and went over it to give it a texture. And then I took some of the darker gray granite and mixed some brown with it to make some rocks to sit on there. I thought it'd be neat to have those at the side. And I thought it would be a good look to have, more layers and more depth to the shadow box. So then after I had those done, I decided to go ahead and make a bunch of vines that I wanted hanging down around the sides of the shadow box, or the door in the shadow box, I should say. They're not going to be on the sides of the shadow box, but they're going to be sides of the doors inside the shadow box. So these, again, I just used green clay, rolled them out into the snakes, and then kind of bent them, and then laid them on the paper. And you'll see here I do put these on the paper. You can bake that, but one of the reasons why I do it is so it's easy to transfer to the baking sheet. Now it's time to bake our clay. Remember, always bake your clay according to package instructions. Now that everything's been baked and cooled, I can start putting it all together. So you'll see here that it's a little bit tight for that inside frame of the shadow box, which I knew it would be. But this way I can slowly trim it down and get it to be just kind of this nice snug fit. And that way I don't have any gaps on the side. I really wanted this fairy door to just fill that shadow box. And then one thing I noticed when doing this, I cut the bottom of the door because I knew, in theory it should be able to open up and clear that grass. But what ended up happening is I had this gap where the grass wouldn't go in underneath the door, and I just had this blank spot that looked out of place. So I trimmed the grass down with the X-Acto knife and got it to fit more snugly in there, and so that way it would cover up that gap. Now that I have it so all the pieces fit inside the shadow box, I'll go ahead and glue those in. As always, I'm using Loctite Super Glue Gel. I wish I had a sponsorship from them because I mention them all the time. But that's what I use on these, and it seems to work pretty well. So I did glue that base in there. I had to break the rocks off because they were sticking too far back. So I'm still able to use those. I just glue them on individually. And then after that, I go ahead and glue the vines into place. These were a little bit trickier because there's not much surface area to attach that glue. I think if I do something do another shadow box with the vines like that, I will maybe make the top of them a little thicker to give me more of an area to attach glue to, so I can attach to that top piece. Or maybe do the opposite of what I did, or not necessarily opposite, but kind of do the same thing as I did with the grass and do one bulk thing so I can glue it in place a lot easier. I definitely had a lot of fun making this, and I have a lot of ideas for other ones I want to do. So if I do more of these, I'll probably do like a quick look video or maybe just a time lapse, since this video itself kind of explains everything, so I don't really need to do that again. But I do want to share any future ones I do. Now that everything's glued into place, we'll go ahead and put the shadow box together. It'll be ready to go. And here is the finished fairy door shadow box. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any ideas for future videos, please leave them in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, never stop creating. Bye. You can purchase items with my mascot on it from my TeePublic Store. And you can purchase my one-eyed blobs from my Etsy shop. Links to my TeePublic Store, my Etsy shop, my Facebook page, and my Instagram page are in the description box below.